Mic 14.
Good evening, and thank you for coming. And we are really excited to get to this stage in the process of reevaluating the library that we have and the library that we want to have. This is a public meeting, so we're going to conduct it according to those rules, but we've got an awful lot to do in a very short time, so we're also going to try to be as informal as we can get away with without having Mr. Brown come back from the grave to tell us that we have violated his act. So with that, I'm going to kick this off before we get into public comment and just give a little bit of a background on behalf of Councilmember Holstege and myself as to where we're at and what we are looking for the Library Building Committee to do. And then later we will have public comments from anyone who would like to make them, and we will go around the table and ask everyone who's on the building committee to introduce themselves and to talk about why they're interested and excited to be a part of this project. So one of the things that we want to say right at the very beginning, you were picked both for your individual talents and collectively. We wanted to have a group of individuals that reflected the community in Palm Springs, and most importantly, reflects the people who actually use the library. So we're very excited to have each and every one of you. I think there are some tremendous strengths that we have around the table that will help us as we try to move forward. I went back and did just some very quick history. The very first public library was actually not a City of Palm Springs library. It was a public available library room in the Presbyterian Church that was named Elaine's Library, and that started in 1925. It was another 16 years before 1941 when the Wellwood Library opened. 1939 when we actually founded putting a library together. We stayed in the Wellwood Library for 34 years until 1975. Still have it for use, but it has now been 44 years that we have been at Sunrise in that building. So we've actually outlived the length of time that we used Wellwood as a primary library. It is very appropriate in time that we be looking at what is the library that we need for the 21st century. And we are trying now to take a look at what is that library going to be that 35, 40, 45 years from now, folks are looking back and saying thank you to the folks in 2019 who made the decisions to go forward with what was going to be needed to get us through most of the century that we are now in. We have currently on City Council a commitment to truly explore moving forward with the library. There have been starts and stops over the last few years, and we'll spend a little time making sure we understand some of the recent history. But our focus is on the future. And what do we need to do to take advantage of the opportunities we have today and to take advantage of the openness that we have on this City Council to moving forward with something new. And that's an opportunity that we don't want to pass up. There are 3 primary sites that are on the table right now. One would be to refurbish, expand at the existing building. The second is we will take possession of Block G downtown in as a part of the agreement, and we have, once we do take possession, we will have the right to build on that site. And a library is very clearly a structure that could be erected there. It would be a more vertical library than it would be horizontal, but the space to take and do a building exists there, and we will have ownership of that land. The College of the Desert is in the process of opening a Palm Springs campus. We have had discussions with College of the Desert, and there is mutual interest on the part of COD in having a public library that would be within their campus area. If that library is simply a public library without a direct connection to COD, that interest is probably lukewarm. If you are talking about a library that has a direct connection to programs at COD, then there is clear interest in that. The Board of Trustees at the College of the Desert have not set an agreement with Palm Springs as a part of an agenda item. There's been no votes taken. So these are preliminary discussions at this point, but they are discussions that we've been encouraged to continue to have. And as the course of the work that you're taking and doing, you will have an opportunity to engage further in those discussions. Nothing limits you to those 3 sites, but, and here's the very big but, we know we have the right to build on any one of those 3 sites, assuming with COD that we were able to conclude an agreement. So if there's an alternative that comes up in the course of your discussions and your work, and you believe that's a vastly stronger alternative, then you have the ability to consider that. But part of that consideration has to be, what's the viable path to obtaining the rights to build in comparison to where there already is. And we don't want to foreclose those discussions. We want you to make decisions as to what's appropriate. One of the areas when it comes to COD where there is already some very clear interest is if there was a social justice, a historical Palm Springs connection to the library. I would draw an example to the LGBT history component of the San Francisco Library, and connecting exhibits, connecting collection within a library that would have a connection to programs that are taking place at the COD campus, and providing an opportunity for students on the campus to have engagement at the local library. That's only one area where there could be that connection, but I think you have to look at something where you're making a connection to 2 programs that need to exist at COD. There are out there a number of examples of public libraries and academic libraries that have worked together. Some of those examples illustrate exactly why it can be an incredibly creative opportunity, and others are great examples of how not to do it. So look at both. Look at all of the options. We will ask you to review each one of the 3 options that we've identified. You may make a determination that you think one truly stands out over the others. You're certainly at liberty to state your preferences, or to say, in our minds, we did not come up with a preference, but here's our analysis of the opportunities. We are going to, he's the chair of the library trustees, and we would like Ed McBride to chair the meetings as you move forward. We know that you cannot, in the course of the next couple of months, completely design a new library and provide all of the opportunities and analysis that goes into it. What you're helping City Council do is to decide what is the primary path that we should go forward on. What is the direction that we should follow? Where do you think is the best pathway forward for us so that we can make decisions? This City Council that's currently sitting would like to have that analysis before we step down, and that will happen in December, so we are asking you to complete your work to be able to report to us in October. We are also asking that you consult with the library trustees. Anyone else that you wish to consult with, that's your decision, but very much involve the trustees. They have not only under our charter, but they have, in terms of their expertise and experience, great insight that I think we think will be very helpful to you. So,
I'll just add briefly, I've said publicly dozens of times now, I should never follow Lisa Middleton. So I think that was thorough, and thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for agreeing to serve on this committee. This is an important decision for our city and for our community. We know that there are a lot of stakeholders and people who've been doing this work about thinking through the future of the library for decades. This is really fundamentally our position as a community decision, and your role here on this committee is to really engage the community and represent the full community in making a recommendation to us as the subcommittee and then the full city council. The decision about where the future library will be or remain or be built is up to the city council with all of your direction, but really it belongs to the community. We're building and developing a library of the future. I know that's all the work that's gone through, and thinking through really creatively about what that library, where it should be and what it should look like, and what factors we really all together should consider in making that decision. So thank you for your willingness to serve the city and to help us think through and to engage the community. And thank you to everyone who's here. This is a great turnout for a meeting. So I know a lot of community interest and a lot of work that people are doing to make this decision. So thank you all for participating. Do you want to move to public comment?
Yeah. Is there anyone from the public that would like to come forward and make any comments? Please.
So why don't you come here, we have a microphone, and use this seat.
Come sit by me.
Okay.
So it's recorded, so if you could the mic is on for you, and if you'd like to say your name and give your public comment.
Okay. And we're not timing you, so we ask you just to be respectful of everyone's time.
This will be very brief. My name's Dick Burket. I am not here representing the HSPB. I've changed my whole thought process of how I was going to approach this after listening to that amazing introduction, and the fact that we did, the facts that you did give us, very impressive and helpful. I would just ask one thing, that as you go through the process, if you would please consider the what would happen to the existing Cody Library. And I'm sure you're not surprised that I might mention that. And such an important building, and it's under the stewardship of the city. And so that is the main concern, is that, and you certainly have some interesting options on the table. There's no question about it. So I would just ask that you give careful consideration and do let us know what you would have in mind as to what would happen to that building and how it would be protected going forward. So that's really just the main thing, and I applaud you for what you're doing, and I think it's a very exciting project, and I wish you well. And again, I thank everybody that's being, I know what is involved to be with the committee, so thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak now?
Hello.
My name is Rosemary Flynn, and I'm a member of the board of the Friends for the Public Library. And it's been a wonderful experience. And I am representing a group of people who would really strongly advocate for the existing site. Is very centralized. It's in an area that really embraces seniors, high school students. It's going to be close to the COD. And it's an interesting structure, but it just seems like there is a world of opportunity in that park to create something that's larger and into the future, to bring that into an area and a space that's unique for the library. When you look at who many of the people that utilize the library, it's a lot of working women, a lot of working people. And for some reason, when they come in there, it's an opportunity to relax with their kids after work, and it's got easy access. You're not fighting with parking at a college campus or downtown. So it really provides an ease and a place that kids love to come, and that the families like to attend to their kids there, because it is just a little bit easier than many of the places in town. So it's a beautiful building. I know that there are multiple issues with the building, but it seems like there's opportunity and space with that park that could accommodate the growth that's needed for the library. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak now? Okay.
Hi, I'm Kathy Brandt, and I was a member of the Palm Springs Public Library Friends Board for many years and served as its president at one time. It really does sound like the committee is already looking very seriously at the COD connection. I would like to just make one suggestion, and that has to do with autonomy. What has made the library so central and so important to our community is that it is autonomous. We've had wonderful leadership. We've had good boards. We have a wonderful board of trustees that would, really have been guiding us for so many years. I just would like to see if you do go with COD, that it does not become a part of COD. In other words, the governance of the library would be the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment?
This will not be your last chance to make comments. With that, I'd like to go around the table and ask everyone who is part of the building committee, as well as our librarian and our advisors, to introduce themselves and talk about why they're excited about this project. And since we asked him to be chair, we'll start with Ed.
My name is Ed McBride. I'm currently the president of the Board of Trustees for the Palm Springs Public Library. I've served a term now of 3 years, going into my 4th year. My background, so that you know, is that I'm also a local business owner here in Palm Springs, and I've been involved with libraries for over 35 years, not only as someone who supports libraries, but I've worked in many libraries and held positions in libraries, administrators. I most recently, my career was working with organizations that produced consortia for libraries to bring buying power together for libraries. So I've spent most of my career until recently in libraries. I'm here because I think that we have a world-class city and we need a world-class library program. I think when we look at what we have so far, we've done tremendous things with what we've had, and I think that we can do much more tremendous things with what we can get. And I think that as a trustee, I can tell you, it wasn't many months ago we were sitting in this room and we had no options. We knew we would be a lot of hard work to make anything happen for something for the library program. I feel we're very blessed as a community to have 3 options today. And the support of our community, I think, is just overwhelming. And I worked in communities where you don't have that. So I think we're very lucky to be sitting here with this in front of us. And I just feel that we're on our way to making a really great decision, and that our community is ready for that. So.
Jeannie?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's so nice to see such great support. I'm Jeannie Case. I'm the library director, and next week will be my 7-year anniversary. Can you believe I've been here 7 years? I've been a librarian since 2002, and all of that time I worked in the valley, in the Coachella Valley. So I know library. All my time here has been in libraries, and I helped renovate the Palm Desert Library 7 years ago. They've been renovated for 7 years, and then we helped renovate the Wellwood. So I do have that experience, and I love those types of projects, and I love serving our community. And the library of today is different than it was when I was a kid. Now it's a community gathering place, and it's a place where you come and you get cultural events and learn things, and it's just a like I said, and like they were talking about, the community gathering place. It's a place to come, not just go get the books and go home. It's a place to be. So I thank you all for helping us make these decisions, and it's gonna be fun.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name's Naomi Soto. I am a commissioner on the Measure J Commission, so representing that hat here at this table. And I couldn't agree more with what Jeannie said about libraries being a gathering place. In every city, my favorite place to spend time are in libraries and parks. And this city has them right next to each other, and that's so special. And so what I'm looking forward to in these series of conversations is really thinking ahead about who lives here, who participates and engages in the library programming, and who do we want to be in the library that isn't there now. So really looking ahead as to the residents and families of this city. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Michael Hirschbein. Currently, I'm on the Planning Commission, City of Palm Springs, and I'm also a board member of the Friends of the Palm Springs Library. I've had a long interest in literacy. I used to volunteer in the LA Public Library System as an adult literacy mentor, and I got a lot of satisfaction out of doing that. I just love reading, so I think bringing that love to the community and leveraging that is something I'm looking forward to. I also spent 35 years as an architect designing large-scale urban planning projects, so I have some knowledge as to what constitutes good urban design, and I hope to bring that focus to the decision-making process. I'd like to just take a moment to thank the trustees for bringing our consultants on board. I think that was a brilliant move and really spurred this whole initiative, and I think a lot of good things are going to come out of that. And I'd like to thank our council members for choosing me, because I'm going to really like doing this. And so thank you for doing that. I recently emailed this group an article from the New York Times about how libraries are now becoming focuses. This is around the world. This is a global phenomenon, both in developing and developed countries, and poorer cities and richer cities, smaller cities and bigger cities, how libraries are really becoming the icon of the city that they're in. And we have an opportunity to do that, be it in the existing space or some new space, but we really need to set our sights high. We should not be trying to compromise on what we do here. We should be reaching for the stars, because if we don't do that, I don't think we've done a service to the city. And just as you were talking about the Wellwood, I thought, well, that at the time, and still is, probably the most prominent piece of land in the entire city. And that's the spot that was chosen for the library. And that's the kind of forward thinking, the kind of importance that we have to attach to this site selection process, and I'm really excited about it. Thank you.
Hi, Kathy Wormick, and I'm on the Library Board of Trustees. I just want to say that my love of libraries started when I was a little girl and used to go every Saturday with my dad and take out 10 books and then read them all night. When he would yell at me and I would have a flashlight and I would wake up groggy in the morning. But I started out loving libraries, printed material, and recently loved digital material, but find I spend many hours a day reading. My background is I'm both an attorney and I was a real estate developer developing affordable housing, and then a lender lending to affordable housing. I've had about 13 years on planning commissions, chaired 2 of them, and bring some of those experiences here. I'm excited about this. I'm excited for 2 reasons, and nobody's really talking about the fact here that with the library we have, it has problems, significant problems that worry me when I worry about staff having water dripping on them, the skylight's not working, some of the pieces of the building coming apart, the plumbing not working, the air conditioning not working, there being no setup for the current electronic world that we live in, and it can't be put into that building very easily. So I'm looking at it, although I love the building, the historic nature of the building doesn't make me automatically choose one site over another. I think we have to look hard at what we can do with that building, and also look at what we want for the future. In the building we have right now, we can't meet. There's not enough space, and the community wants meeting rooms. So I think when we look at the existing site, and we've had some wonderful people speak about it, we have to see what can be done within the fact that it's potentially it's not yet class 1, but it could be class 1 in a few months. We have to look at what we can do with the historic nature of that building for modern needs, and then see what it would cost, and then look at what we can get for costs at the other sites, and what would be the most exciting. I think we have to think about our children. I probably think about that first because they're the first people we want to have use the library. And our library does a great job with programming for children. I think we don't have the plant that allows us to program for the young people that we want to have come live in Palm Springs, or some of the older ones of us who have a lot of time to meet and, would love reading groups and other kinds of groups in the library. So that's why I'm here. It's why I'm on the board. I really don't bring library skills. I bring sort of real world skills of what does it cost, how do you do it, and can we push it to get it done.
My name is Juanita Garner, and I work for the Palm Springs Unified School District. Currently, I'm working at Catherine Finchie Elementary School, and I work mainly with students that are struggling with reading and reading comprehension. So a lot of the advice I give parents is take your kids to the library. This is going on and that's going on, and try to encourage them, of course, to read as much as possible. I'm also very involved with the community, and specifically with the Latino community in Palm Springs. A lot of times they don't feel that they are included in a lot of the things that happen here, and so my big push is to let them know that they're welcome and that they're part of our city and that they need to be heard and contribute to what's going on. So that's kind of why I'm here. I'm here because I believe that we need a library that's going to serve our kids today, and what they need is far beyond what we are able to provide right now, and what they're going to need in the future is going to be even bigger than that. So I'm really excited about introducing really new and fresh ideas that are going to serve the children and the future adults of our community. And I'm so happy that I was invited to be here, because I feel that even today, I shared with a lot of my coworkers and a lot of parents that I was coming to this meeting today, and I was just mobbed by, well, tell them this and tell them that, and make sure you say this and make sure you say the other. So I'm really excited to be able to represent them. Thank you.
Wow, so impressed with everyone. My name is Maria Song, and I'm a local architect here in Palm Springs. I've been fortunate to work on a renovation project for the Palm Springs Fire Station. The building was built in 1971. I believe that Palm Springs is made of many different villages. We have the downtown village, we have the Smoke Tree Village, and every village is different of its characteristics and people who visit these villages. This library site is one of those villages. And the question really is about asking the uncomfortable questions of, wait a minute, we have land, so how much can we expand? Well, what would happen to the park? What would happen to our view from the city if he says that when a 1971 building doesn't work, we're going to build a new one, and then what are we going to do with the existing one? There's just so much to look at and so much to evaluate, and the idea is, can we live with this discomfort of this adjacencies that we're not probably going to solve during the next 2 months, but we could probably ask those questions and then come up with, I think, a very smart recommendation. So why am I here is to ask those questions, and I'm really honored to be here as well.
Hello, my name is Donald Morgan. I'm a senior retired Air Force officer serving on the subcommittee, and thank you very much for this opportunity to serve Palm Springs. Serving has always been a part of my life from a little kid, growing up in the military, and then following service before self, doing my military service. And I've always had a love for the libraries, dating back to my childhood, as well as where I met my wife 35 years ago and courted her in the library, and we're still married. But on a serious note, I'm really excited to be part of the group because I want to kind of shape what we have developed for the future and also have a love for architecture.
Hello, I'm Tony Garvey. I'm with Library Strategies, and we're here to support you in any way we can as you go about the process of evaluating and selecting a site for this library. I was also here a number of months ago to assist in the strategic planning process, so I feel like I've adopted this community to some extent. We evaluated the library as well as worked on a strategic plan when I was here, and I found a very, very good library. But I think you could have a really great library in this community, and I think you should. And I'm happy to be here and help with that in any way I can. I'm also a librarian. I spent 15 years as the director of Phoenix Public Library at a time when we were building many libraries in Phoenix, and as a director in a place called Loudoun County, which is a bedroom community of Washington, D.C., where we also were building a lot of libraries. So I have kind of a unique background that I can bring to this group and to support and assist you in any way I can. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Sue Hall, and I was the co-founder of Library Strategies, which is an international library consulting group. We were created by our friends of the library in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is actually our library's foundation. And I had nothing to do with this, but it was one of the best library foundations in the country. So people kept coming to us saying, how can we do what you're doing? So we created a consulting group about 16 years ago. And we've worked in Eastern Europe and Saudi Arabia, all over this country. So we've seen a lot of libraries and worked with a lot of library organizations. Library buildings are not my specialty. Getting people to ask the right questions and answer those questions is what I bring to the table. What Tony and I are going to do over the next couple of months working with this building committee is we're going to be doing a lot of your research. You have a wonderful, committed committee who's going to make a very big decision within a very short period of time. So our job is to go out and learn about your options. What are the pluses? What are the minuses? What should be considered given what we've learned about your community? And we learned a lot through your strategic planning process about where your values are. And you're a very, very, very unique community in so many wonderful ways. I mean, we've really grown to care about this community because you are so unique and have such wonderful resources, not the least of which are the people. So our job is to take all of what we've learned, what we're going to go out and learn very intensively, and bring it back to the committee. We are not going to make a recommendation to you on which option you should choose. That's the job of the committee and ultimately the city council. But we're hopefully going to bring you the data you need to make the wisest decision for your community.
Well, let me do a little personal part. I started going to libraries pretty early in my life, and as someone who was closeted through all of my youth, a public library and the school library was the place that I could go and ask questions in the books that I was terrified to ask anyone else, and terrified to even speak the words out loud. And in a working class city with a small public library, I started finding answers and stories in those books that it still took me a long time to say to anyone else, but it was in a library that I first learned who I was. That's what libraries do and give us. And that's much more important than picking up one of these and hitting Google and asking a question.
Again, I have to follow you. Rethink this seating arrangement. Christy Holstege. We just wanted to share some personal, meaning for the library for us. So thank you all for all of you sharing. It's just been really powerful and really inspired by everyone around the room. For me, my husband grew up in Palm Springs. He's third generation Palm Springs here. So his parents grew up here as kids. He grew up here as well. When we have kids, it'll be fourth generation Palm Springs. So for us, thinking about the Palm Springs of the future and a library to bring, kids are going to grow up in a very different, and they already are growing up in different environment and different world. So thinking about the Palm Springs of the future and the library of the future, I think is really exciting work for us to do. How lucky we are to be at this moment of history together, to how lucky we are to have an opportunity to build a library of the future in Palm Springs that was not on the table 10 years ago. So we're in a very privileged place as a city, and I'm just inspired by everyone to be a part of it. A little bit about our role, I think, and so we can talk about process and additional meetings and how you want Lisa and I as a subcommittee to participate in this work. If there are meetings that you want to kind of go on and take on. But I think our role is to really help with city staff to get you all the information that you need to make an informed decision. Advocating for this committee to have everything that we need to do the work and answer some of those hard questions. Because I think, yes, we need to answer the hard questions, not just pick the easiest way, but really think about what's going to be here in 30 years and 50 years for our families and residents of the future.
Sure, just briefly. So I'm David, the city manager, and obviously we have a lot of work to do in a short amount of time, and the issue of questions was raised. There will be a lot of questions, and I would like you to have to rely on staff to provide some of that information. I'm very happy our consultants are here because there are things we don't know. So I think working together, the body and universe of information that's going to be important for you to make this decision, we're going to work closely together to make sure that we can supply that for you. So I think that's what our role is going to be. And I think I would just note that, this has been a lot of years coming. On a personal note, this has been a lot of years coming. And if some of you recall back when we did Measure J, where the residents agreed to tax themselves, the main thrust of that was the downtown. But also there was a lot of discussion that the second big item was the library, that would give us the ability to actually do it. So this is a very exciting time. So again, we're going to be here to support you to get the information you need and working with the consultants to do that. Thank you.
Well, I'm honored to have been asked to serve. In a previous life, I was an emergency physician, so I'm comfortable with the timeline. I have served on the Architectural Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission, as well as the HSPB in the past, just making you know how old I am. And I'm a small business owner in Palm Springs, and I was one of the founding members of the Palm Springs Library Foundation, and I currently serve as the president of the Palm Springs Historical Society. So I hope to be able to bring some of that historical perspective because Palm Springs is entirely unique, and if we approach this project in that vein, I think we'll be wildly successful. And so anyway, I'm glad to be here and hope to contribute. So thank you. My name is Tracy Conrad.
So we're missing two members of the committee that just could not be here this evening. David Brinkman, who's the executive director of the Desert AIDS Project and brings an enormous wealth of experience and background, not the least of which is one of the most prolific fundraisers in Palm Springs, and depending on what direction we go, there may clearly be a role for private philanthropy in achieving the goals that we have. That's not the only reason we asked David to be a part of this, but that's an area of expertise that is needed for this project. And the last member is Sandra Lyon, who is the superintendent of schools for Palm Springs Unified School District. And we forgot to check that second and fourth Tuesdays are the board meetings for the Board of Education. So we will try to avoid making that mistake in the future of having a meeting on second or fourth Tuesday. But we're really thrilled that Dr. Lyon agreed to be a part of this group. So I think something that came out from everyone is a sense that Palm Springs is a very unique community, and we want a library that does not look like you could pick it up and drop it in another community and it would fit right in. There needs to be, in our library in Palm Springs, something that lets people know when they walk through the door and all of the time that they're in Palm Springs. And there are a lot of different ways to approach that, but so. What else do we have to do today?
Certainly want to talk about, I think you enumerated the sites. So, maybe if that is the universe of sites, the three sites, whether you're going to remodel, rebuild, or the other two, the downtown or with COD, I think maybe that's the first place to start, unless there's other nominations.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and going back to the importance of the project to the community and the importance of the site as it symbolizes that importance to the community. And from an urban planning point of view, and from an urban planning point of view, I would like the committee to consider the site, and I don't know the block name, but it's the one, F? Block F opposite the new public park. It's more horizontal as opposed to what would be required vertical. It's a much more important site. It would constitute a downtown civic campus between the park, the museum, and the museum and a library at that site. It would be a more prominent site. It would be an easier site to design an iconic building on. It would have interaction with the park, so it would be a symbiotic relationship. The park could take advantage of the people going to the library, and the library could take advantage of the people out to use the park. The city owns a piece of that site that's up against the library, the museum. It's not the majority of it, obviously, but it owns that. It could combine that with the part that's where the babies currently are. It could possibly take advantage of restricted parking for the library, and I just think we should consider it as a sort of an ultimate site. May not happen, but I'd like that to be part of the agenda to analyze that site for those reasons and probably some other ones too.
Is there a second?
Yeah, and I think that that's exactly what we want from this committee, and I think that there will be a lot of thought that goes into that, and so for us, and I meant to say, we have not made up our minds. We honestly, obviously, and want you to come to the same place of really thinking about the pros and the cons and all of the questions that each site raises. So I can't speak to the viability and feasibility of that site. I know that we've discussed it a little bit.
The main issue, obviously, is we don't control that site. The other three we actually control in some form or fashion, or have the ability to actually go forward. That site would require, an additional amount of significant money, potentially, and then obviously the acquiring the site. So that would be in a whole different direction. But again, if it was the important, for important reasons, it's not that you couldn't do there. It's just it would be significant other challenges as well.
What I might offer is a fourth option about another site. So having sort of an open-ended another site, and then we can work together to kind of narrow that down. So if there is that one, if there are other recommendations here that we're not going to decide right now, but that we're going to, in talking to the community and getting public input, put in that category of other sites, I think that would be possible to consider it that way.
And maybe, council member?
No, I think if there is another site, and it could be that one or it could be something else, that's something that should surface from within your group and do your evaluation as to what you believe is appropriate there. The question of how we would acquire the right to build there is something that has to be a part of that analysis. But I don't think we on City Council want to foreclose any conversation at this stage. We've asked this group to come together to identify what's the best path forward. So for us to tell you it's this one or that one would be in direct contradiction to what we've asked you to do.
Can I ask a question? So our goal is to analyze those sites, any other additional sites that the group wants to consider, and come up with a recommendation so that the council is going to have a development program or have a timeline. Is that the goal?
Right, so that you can make a recommendation in October. So that would be probably you can decide. We're really leaving it open for you all to collaborate on. So in the form of a report or in form of a presentation, however you want to present that information to the subcommittee and the city council about your recommendation for site and the analysis that went into that in October, and then this current city council can make the decision about site selection so that we can move forward on thinking about financing that and moving forward on the development of that site that's selected.
Can I ask a question about the proposal to partner with COD? Would the committee have the opportunity to meet with COD officials who are responsible for making that decision? And also, I'd just like to make a comment. It was stated that we have control over 3 sites. We don't really have control over 3 sites. We have control over 2 sites. The COD site we don't have control over. But
I would say control just in the sense of the ability to actually build there, not having to acquire it.
Well, we don't yet. I mean, that's up to the COD to say that, right? We don't have the ability to say that.
They've committed to
Right.
it, so presuming they go back on their commitment, that's a viable site.
Right. So anyway, would the committee have the opportunity to sit down with those decision makers in order to evaluate the viability of that?
That is something which we want to have happen.
And would staff set that up, or?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Just a question. I'd like to see the sites. I think for this whole group, I think it's important that people walk and feel them and understand where in the COD site they possibly might commit to. I know the downtown site's a little hard to walk because it's filled with machinery right now, but we can at least walk around it. And take a look at it and take a look at the parking possibility. For me, parking's always an issue until we finally get into a different mode of transportation, maybe 10 years, 20 years from now.
I think that's really important. Also, it's very difficult to just in a vacuum pick a site without
Right.
having some guidelines about what the architecture wants to be, what the budget is going to be. Is there some
Yeah, and if I could
Guidelines.
offer this, just because Actually, this is an epistemological question, because how do you know what you don't know? How do you know what you know? And we don't know so much. And it was said there's a lot of unanswered questions, and you're not going to know them because we've been struggling to find them. They're going to evolve. I think for our process here, if we're going to be able to have a general recommendation in a 2-month time frame, and I'm just saying from working with this for 10 years, my sense is, looking at the site is fine, what the building is going to be, what the functions are, the size. We're not going to be able to get into any of that. I think that's the next step. Right now, it's just moving off the dime on the site, because once we figure out a site, then we can do those kinds of things. And I think what I would suggest is, let's presume it's going to be the highest and best one we want, and each site would accommodate it, because I think it could. So I think maybe the first thing to do is to be able to list the pros and cons of each site in sort of a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, that you guys can actually get your teeth into, and then start drilling down deeper. So maybe that is what we have to come to you with at the very next meeting, and get that calendar quickly. And how do we arrive at that? And I think it's a couple of things. One, we can communicate with you, email, phone, and get your pros and cons generally on each site. We have a list of pros and cons of each site. The consultants, I suspect, might be able to help us with that. So at our next meeting, we have a chart on the wall, and you'll see it before you get here, the list of the pros and cons of each site, and that might be at least the next step to move forward to start narrowing this down. And you also could have, Michael, obviously a fourth site on there with the possibilities there as well.
And I would just suggest not just pros and cons of the site, but the programming, which this group can really inform, should drive that as well. It should.
Well, if we do programming, I don't know that we're going to get where we want to be on the site yet.
This group can list what the programming must be or must include, and that might make one site more desirable than another.
True.
So may I jump in here as someone who's done buildings and libraries in particular? What I think we probably should do is, our consultants are here, remember, as a resource, and they have years of experience in doing these. And believe me, we're not the first library in the United States to have to do this. There is published criteria for how you would select a site for a building to serve the size of our community. They're shaking their heads, they understand this. I think we start there, but this is the criteria that you should consider. And there's a lot of things, including program, by the way, and population served, traffic patterns. There's all kinds of things that we need to probably start with and have them produce for us and tweak according to our unique community. We always have to do that. And let that be our first guide and our first SWOT. I've done many SWOTs. Incorporate in that SWOT analysis when we look at each of these locations as a first run through, because I think we all need to be educated on each of these sites. Walking them is really, I think, key as well. I think we all live in this community. We've seen what's happened just up the street with all of a sudden there's a mall that's gone, and how that just changes the way we look at that space. So I think it would be really important for our consultants to start immediately. I will tell you that they asked me to give them a little tour today, so we did go downtown and walk. So they saw the lot downtown, they saw the College of the Desert, and they know our library now very well. So they've actually had a little bit of a sneak peek. And so I think it's only fair to have them now start outlining for us some of the things we should consider. Is that okay with everyone? I mean, I think that's a great start, looking at what other libraries and other communities look at.
Possibly you could send out to people where the sites are, and people can go walk them themselves. But I don't know where on the College of the Desert site it's going to possibly be.
And no one does yet. That's part of it's going to be there somewhere.
That makes it hard. Very hard.
Well, it might.
But let me finish.
We choose.
Can I finish? Just because I got interrupted before, because I had another question I wanted to ask. There are two pieces to this. One is Jeannie, and maybe people need to do it individually. Jeannie put together a wonderful presentation on the history of the attempts to rehab the library, and I think people here need to see it. It was educational for us. I just wanted to throw that out. The other is that there's something unique with the existing site because of the architect involved. And I know on the board, I wanted us to, at some point, have had a historic architect take a look at possibilities there and limitations. And I know the city doesn't have somebody like that in the list of architects they could use. I know Leo Marmol offered to do that, and I think he offered to do it for free, but because of insurance, I couldn't even suggest it. But he's somebody who's done most of the major historic restorations in town. So I just think those are issues that I think, as we look at the sites, we kind of have to put our arms a little bit around what we have now and what the possibilities and limitations of it are, in maybe even a different way than we look at the two other possible sites. So that's just what I wanted to say. I know, and I love your suggestion about criteria. I think, we also need to look at our existing site against current criteria. But I do think it's that particular site has some features to it that a regular urban library doesn't have, or maybe doesn't have. Maybe San Francisco had all of those, or more.
Kathy, do you mean in a good way, that it has more potential?
No, I think it has some potential because it's historic and important, and what other city has a koi pond in the middle of their library? No, it's the most charming thing it could possibly have when you walk into it. But it has that, and it'll also have limitations because you probably can't add to the building. You'd have to be an adjunct because of the historic, or determine if that's really true.
Or you could go up, but there's controversy about whether that is really Bill Cody, just so you know.
I know.
People, yeah.
Maybe you can help fill that in. But those are the kinds of things that in a city that focuses on historic, saving our historic fabric, we have to at least talk about before we make a recommendation one way or the other that's different than another possibility.
So Kathy, you do raise a good point about the history of the renovation. So I think we do need to get that information out, because that's almost a threshold question, that if we're going to stay there, it's a remodel versus a new. So that's a very important aspect.
So I wanted to tell you how to find it. It's on YouTube. So our Library Board of Trustees meetings are recorded, and if you go to YouTube and search for City of Palm Springs, our Library Board of Trustees meeting, July 26th, was the date that I gave the presentation. And the slideshows are there, and it transitions nicely it follows along with the slides on the screen. So you can go watch the presentation.
So let's get those
Homework.
Slides out. We can duplicate them and get the slides, we can send them.
Yeah.
Also.
So
anyway,
if I
that's
can,
all.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So if I can, I think that's right, that we sort of create onboarding materials for all the committee members. And so we wanted to have this meeting to introduce you, to talk about the process, to talk about what you need to gain information, to make this type of decision. So I think if we can think about staff and the consultants about the work that you've done and sharing that with the committee. And so I know the strategic plan that was just done, the work that the consultants did, if you have background information about that work as well. I know that we have data about the current usage of the library, things like that I think would be useful. The sites, and we didn't do a clear staff presentation about the 3 sites with PowerPoint that we could do, or that staff or consultants could help with, because there are multi-factors to consider. And then maybe if you have, or the consultants have good examples of the criteria that, in the process that we should use in moving forward, and then we can send that to the group.
If I may, 2 points, and Tony, feel free to jump in. You have a very concentrated decision-making process, so you have to move quickly. And I'm the process person, so my first thing is, how can we leave this room giving you assignment or giving you next steps? And so one of the first things that Tony and I have been working on is a set of criteria that would be non-community specific, things that you need to know about how to locate a library and what, accessibility and parking and those kind of very basic things. And what we're building onto that criteria are things that would be unique to your community. So we're going to be developing that and getting that to you in the next couple of days. And what we'd like to do is sort of present it to you in a template and then recommend that you do a walkabout to each of the 3 sites and can literally go yes, no. So it's a tool to help you look at all 3 sites relatively objectively. So that's the first thing that we would suggest. The second point that I would make is a cautionary one. It's very easy to get to what's going to happen in the library. What's the children's room going to look like? Are we going to have a community room? You're not there yet. And you can't, quite frankly, get there by the end of October. So that's would you agree? Yeah? Yes. I'd hate for her to disagree in front of people. That's your next phase, and it may be done by the same building committee or a new group of people. But this is actually, in some ways, the more direct piece of decision making that's going to happen. It's going to get more interesting when you talk about what you want the building to look like and what you want to happen in the building. But we want to be clear that that's not happening in this phase. We're actually doing 2 pieces of this phase. One is working with the building committee on making a site selection, and the other is working with the foundation and the Friends on determining how these 2 organizations are going to support the city in coming up with the money and furnishing it and putting everything in this wonderful new library that you like, just so you know what all we're doing. But just to caution you, don't jump to what the chairs in the children's reading room are going to look like, because you'll be very disappointed at the end of this process.
I maybe I have been misunderstood. What I'm talking about is a specific program that is unique to Palm Springs that only this group could offer to the council. It must have an LGBT museum place, not about the children's room or meeting rooms or that sort of thing. I'm talking about something programmatic that's unique.
But even that piece of it is what's going to happen in the building. This phase, to my understanding, is site selection only.
But
does that make sense?
No, because what I'm saying is, say you decide that has to be integral to the building. It might change which site you think is most appropriate for it.
And could I also add, the selection of the site right now, to me, it seems very locking in its possibility, without having seen all the backup information. So, for example, the current site right now, can we expand? Can this building become an event building, and next door to it is the brand new jazz library? Is it that the land could be used for dual use? Is it that we can urban plan the area so that there's more programs to it instead of this expansive park in which everybody feels threatened to use it because it's too wide and too open? How much freedom do we have in each of these sites? So, for example, Block G, the limitation is we have to go vertical. So we can't go horizontal. So that limits that side. But the current library side, it could go horizontal, it can go vertical through a change of so many things. But how much are we allowed to do in each of these sites? I think it's the question.
And those are very good questions, and that's part of what the work of this group, your contemplated knowledge on that is going to be hugely important, because you're right, you could add on to the current library or build a new library next to it. So those are all very legitimate questions.
David, could you also distribute, as part of this package we're getting, the plans for the downtown park so that we could look at how the park is proposed to interact with that Block G or possibly Block F? I think that's an important piece of the urban planning part to evaluate that specific site.
Are there plans for COD too?
No. But what COD has said, and the best that we can get out of them is, our camp, we would provide a location in the campus is one of the first phase, and to provide the library and of course, obviously the appropriate parking. The one thing that they did want is that potentially the community room or space that they could use, we could use together. And if I could just add a closing comment, as hard and as challenging as this is, that all the questions you're raising, just the fact that we're actually talking about it now is a huge step forward, because council hasn't even had that discussion yet. We haven't had the ability to do that yet. So and really there's no right or wrong to this, but just this, even going through this process is hugely important. So I want us to feel very excited about it, because this is hugely important work, and no matter what, it will not be a failure, no matter what.
And to answer Maria's questions, which I think are incredible questions, we want you as the City Council Subcommittee to think expansively and think creatively about those opportunities, and that's why we've amassed this brain power that is at this table and in this room, to think that through, because at City Council level, we're often forced to think more specifically, right? We want to make a decision about site selection. We're going to have to pick. But here you have the opportunity, though it's time limited, to answer those questions, get those questions answered, think expansively and creatively. You don't have to solve it perfectly, right? You don't have to come up with plans, but really kind of thinking about it in that way, I think is really helpful, and we want you to do that.
I just have a question about the Lot G, if you don't mind me asking it. Does the city own the parking structure?
Yes.
Just west of
Yes.
it? Is it possible to build up and over?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be magical? Okay. I didn't know if that was a possibility. And is the parking deck under Lot
Yes.
G? Yes. So we can't go down.
There's no parking lot.
There's nothing.
It's on grade, yes, thank you.
I don't know what that means.
It's on land.
It's on dirt.
Not on, yeah.
Oh, okay. So you could go, I didn't know if you could go down.
You could.
Okay. I didn't know. So that's interesting.
Michael, do you know who else, you mentioned that the city, or David, I'm sorry, maybe you mentioned that the city owns part of Block F?
Well, it's not technically Block F. It's adjacent to Block F, between Block F and the museum.
Do you know who owns the rest of that
Yeah,
parcel?
it's Grit.
Okay.
The ownership pattern is very well established.
Okay. Is it established and friendly to something like that?
I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. As one of the criteria, and I would ask the committee to think about this, is time. If the College of the Desert is looking at building an entire community college, that's not going to happen very quickly, more than likely.
They're going to do it in two phases. So
Okay.
the first, we would anticipate, just for our working purposes, that first phase would be over the next 2 years, completed the next 2 to 3 years,
That's good to know, so.
which would include their initial building and our library, if we would choose to go with that.
Okay, that's good to know, because time will be a consideration, I would imagine, on this.
And just to add on that, and I think it would be helpful to really have kind of detailed information about each site and presented to this committee, because we really need you to have all the information, and not just secondhand from us, and we want you to find that information, and we'll help you do that too. But my understanding, we've had 3 or 4 meetings with College of the Desert, is that they don't need to build a library in this college campus, and so they already have enough libraries based on their system. So they were not, when we talked to them, planning initially on building a library, which I've heard in the community is a misunderstanding that, of course, they have to build a library, so we could build a joint one. It's actually, they weren't considering building a traditional library because they don't need to, and so they've kind of indicated that they are open to that, though the board has not made that decision, and it would depend on what it would look like. It's not fully formed. with Grit Development, we've talked to Grit Development. You saw the public negotiation process that went forward. Grit Development is the developer who owns a lot of the new downtown development and some of these parcels. And so the public saw during our negotiations with Grit on the settlement agreement that they had initially offered a site and offered wanting to have a library there. And I think that there's incentives there to have a library that would be a tourist attraction, that would drive walking traffic to the downtown, that would bring people in to then use the shops and things nearby. So I think, those are open negotiations as well that we can do on behalf of this committee to get more information.
Those of us on council received the New York Times column from two sources. Mr. Hirsch sent a copy to us, and Mr. Braun sent a copy to us. One of the things that did transpire, and I think this was not to blame the media, but in the very first open discussion that we had on the potential settlement, I think there was some confusion on the part of the public that a decision had already been made to that the library would be located downtown, and that had not been made. And we on council did not want to leave that impression that a decision had been made. That's not to say that we don't think there are some positives about downtown, and that there are not some true positives about having a destination library in the downtown area. But until we get into the process that we're in now, we didn't want anything coming out that would make it appear we had made a decision that we had not in fact made.
Initially, one of the first offers from Grit, I had to check what's public. Sometimes it's hard to remember from all the meetings, was an offer to build a downtown library on a site at cost with assistance building. So you should know that as well, and that kind of shows the interest.
Just a little bit on the role of Councilmember Holstege and I. We want to help you and be resources to you, but we do not want to get in the way. You're going to make your recommendations. You're going to do your evaluation. And what we hope to receive is something that we can take to City Council, and that is complete enough, that answers the questions that council needs to have answered in order to be able to make a decision. And that's not answering absolutely every conceivable question that we could possibly come up with. It's providing us with the guidance needed to be able to make a decision.
So to understand that, is our next meeting in which the list of pros and cons of each of the site, including potential financing by another party that's not the city? So, for example, Block G comes with at-cost finances of the building. Is that?
No.
Okay,
not
that's
at this
off
point.
the table now. Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
that was
so-
part of the discussion.
Okay.
That
So
wasn't-
every site has $0 right now from help from anywhere. That's not something that we should consider.
Maria?
Yeah.
Measure J was going to, had we had a proposal in place, put $5 million aside for the library this year. And they didn't because it was premature. So I do think there are some other potential sources of help for Measure J. They've been very interested in the library, but I would think those funds probably would go to whichever site the city chose, but we shouldn't assume that there are no dollars. The trustees have around $2 million, so there's some funds, but costs will be substantial I'm assuming on every site. Just for people, there is a joint COD and Riverside County Library that Jeannie helped
Which I used
design.
to work at, so I'm an expert on a joint use facility and.
And it's worth taking a look at that, just to get a feel. It's a really nice library. But it's worth taking a look at what else we have in the valley as people are going through this exercise too.
There's some literature out there on joint libraries. The joint library with San Jose State and the City of San Jose is one that is generally described as a successful joint operation.
This isn't envisioned as a joint operation. This is envisioned as just a building potentially on that site, but operated completely by the city of Palm Springs.
To be operated by the city, but the bit of a twist is, if it is joint in some way that it would have a sort of limited use by them, then they may bring some dollars to the table.
Well, and that, but it would be a single staff. I mean, I think the experience in Palm Desert was the problem. There was two duplicate staff.
Correct. It would be single staff.
Right.
Yes.
So
And
is that kind of
I shouldn't have
discussions you've
used the
already
word
had?
operation, but
Yes.
joint
Correct.
So
location.
those kinds of bullet points, could you supply those to the committee so we're not sort of reinventing the wheel on all that stuff? Because I never heard that before.
So next steps? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, most of the literature that I think we have seen is pretty clear that if you're going to have a joint academic public library, there needs to be a single management staff that runs and operates the library.
So as part of next steps, I'm taking notes here as chair, so I want to make sure I've captured all of the things that we need as a group, consultants. Not in any particular order, but I've been trying to capture these. A copy of our current strategic plan, which I think would be very helpful. The previous proposals that have been before trustees before on the current site and the changes that have been proposed down through the years. The consultants preparing the standard criteria for site selection and a template for most libraries, making it pretty generic for libraries in general. Usage data for the library and how we're being used currently, previously. I think that's very enlightening. The trustees love hearing about that, so we can provide that. Site details and capabilities, we'll start working on trying to pull that together for each site. I don't know if we can have that by the next meeting, but all this discussion about here's the site, here's the capabilities that we will start working on, trying to get that information from city staff, correct? That's where we would go. And that, I think, would be the College of the Desert proposals, for example, and maybe what's been discussed for Lot G downtown. The downtown park planning, what's been proposed for that and agreed or approved. I think we also need a copy of the annual report from the library. Once again, it's just more information about the library from staff and what they do and how they provide services to the community. The question came up, would it be possible for us to get a copy of the Measure J budget that reflects the library? Because you can see what we currently have, $600,000 we're about to spend in this year for the library, and the 1.6 that was approved in this year in addition to that, to answer some of those questions about funding. At least you can see that we're beginning to pop up in those places that are important for the future funding. We can also do that from the Library Foundation. There's not a lot there, but we can also definitely have a Library Foundation. We'll get the publications out there that talk about joint public library academic partnerships. I've worked in one myself. You've worked in one. Been to many, so I think that's really a great thing to look at and to consider. And then also, if we can get some of the COD topics and discussions that have been at least talked about, so that we can look at that.
Historic constraints and with the current library in terms of its history and what's possible with building onto it or next to it, given its potential status.
Is the rest of the board potentially interested in Henry Weiss's most excellent history of the library?
I have copies if anybody wants the history of the library.
It's a fabulous read. I
at
commend it to
Sunrise.
you.
Sure.
I also would love to have the roster of everybody's contact information.
Really important.
Because
Email.
I don't have information for everyone.
We've had email communication. If everyone would just reply back with this is my contact information, how to reach me, and the best way to communicate with you, that'd be great. I'll create that roster for us as well.
David, is your secretary doing that?
Doing
Is there
which?
a roster of communication that she has?
For the committee.
Well, we're going to start with Jeannie. Jeannie will be the point person, will be Jeannie, Sherry, and myself. Now, what I need to do is consult with the consultants about what they're going to do. So just, and I think that's a good review, is what we're going to do is the downtown park plan, the previous work that's been done, the site details and capabilities, those are the things that we're going to do. Please. But I think the big thing for the criteria for site selection obviously is yours. And obviously you have the strategic plan, Jeannie. So let me get together the things I think we have. I'm going to get them to you immediately. And then let's just stay in close contact. I would also note that, again, in Councilmember Middleton reminded me, are we covered by the Brown Act? My sense is you're not a Brown Act body, which means you can communicate freely amongst yourself all the time. That was the intent. I'm going to confirm that with the city attorney tomorrow, but that's my belief. So unless we find out differently, then that's going to put us into a little different pattern. But I think right now we're okay to communicate as freely as we care to do so.
David, actually, the city attorney reached out to me as chair of the trustees, and because I do have that role, instructed that we're not allowed to share anything publicly until we make the formal recommendation to the council. So in other words, I can't go to the trustees and say, hey, we've decided this without you knowing first and saying that we've accepted this report. That's what I was told. So how would that was kind of interesting. You're looking like you're puzzled by that.
That's separate, because you're talking about your separate boards.
Correct.
So there's nothing from you updating them, reporting out.
The recommendation we can't release until the city council has received it?
Well, we don't have a recommendation, so we won't have to worry about it right now.
All right.
Yeah, so that'll work out by itself, I think.
And if we need the city attorney to come to a meeting to brief this group, because I think it's a question about process and integrity of the group, and really a decision for us here is, do we want to follow the Brown Act? Do we really want a coherent, transparent public process, I think, that protects the decision, so that when you come with the excellent report and findings that you're going to bring, that is, unassailable in terms of the work that you did. So that's why we chose to have a meeting like this in public. But formally, it doesn't apply, which means I did not violate when I replied all about that amazing article that you sent. So thank you.
Before this is over, there's going to be a recommendation that's going to come out, and some people are going to be thrilled with that recommendation, and some are going to be not thrilled. For that group, we want to make sure that they immediately say, but I got my voice heard. Every opportunity that I needed to be able to express my point of view, I was given that opportunity. So I don't know who the folks will be that'll be disappointed, but that happens in every public policy decision. If you have to default making sure you are opening your conversation.
And if I may add one more thing, this list is getting quite long of the information that you're going to send out to the committee. And I don't think everything on the list is as relevant as the next thing. So my caution would be, we've gone over all the old proposals with Jeannie all the way from 1985 to 2013. I didn't find them particularly relevant to what you're doing right now. There's one that talks about expanding the building to about 60,000 square feet. I don't know where that came from. That's a huge building for the size of the community. I don't know where that came from. There's another one that has 3 different options with 3 different price points. If we get too involved in figuring those out, it's going to stop you from moving forward. I don't know that they are particularly relevant to what you're trying to do right now. So while I'm not saying don't read them, I would say, I don't think it would be the first thing that I would read if I had a limited amount of time.
What would be the key, the top of the list, from the list?
Information about these specific sites and the criteria on how to evaluate them.
Okay.
Those are the key things you need to focus on right now. What are the limitations of each site? What are the pros and cons? What are the criteria to use to evaluate a site?
Would you agree that maybe some more of that detail would naturally pop up if we find one of those options being where we want to go? That we might want to get more into detail if we decide that we really do want, for example, stay at the current facility. Then we start digging into more of the history of what's been proposed. Is that what you're suggesting? Or
I'm not suggesting that that would be, even relevant at that point. They're old proposals.
Right.
And so I simply didn't find them relevant to where you're going right now, that they're talking about a library in 1989 is a very different library than you're talking about. And so there's a limited amount of relevance that you're going to find in that proposal. Even 10 years ago, that's a different library than you're talking about moving forward. And sometimes they weren't very specific. They just showed where you might expand, but didn't really identify what would happen in those spaces.
I'm watching your face. And I don't agree. The only reason I think they're useful is there's going back to a history of how the building didn't function within 10 years of the time it was built. And that was what I got out of that proposal, was the constraints and the issues. I wasn't looking at it on the Board of Trustees as, were any of those solutions relevant today? But what was the history? Why are we here? Not just that we want to build a fancy new building. I think we're here because the trustees and the library and the city have been working with the building that hasn't worked both functionally and programmatically for quite a while.
Right.
So I only looked at it from that point of view. Right. I didn't want rose-colored glasses on the current building because you love it.
Right.
If you don't know what the issues have been. So that's more of where I thought that report was really, really excellent, is giving the history of what the community tried to do and how many times we stopped because there was a recession.
So could our sorry, Chris.
Go ahead.
So could our next meeting be because Kathy, you have a wealth of knowledge, and I can't wait until I catch up to you. But could our next test be we're gonna get the template, we're gonna get the recommendations, we're also gonna get the body of amazing work that has happened over the last 15 years, and then could our next meeting be a Q&A to you based on that information of what we read, and be able to say, is it true? Is it draining like crazy when it rains? Could we be able to now face-to-face be able to ask those very important questions?
As a ground level?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't have enough information to ask any questions right now. I don't know enough about any sites. I was sitting here thinking, oh my God, what did I do? Why did I agree to this? I can't think of a single thing to ask. But then as we started going through it, we need that base information. We need those basic things that we need to know about each site in order to even have questions to ask.
I appreciate, I think it was Sue, you mentioned you're very process-oriented. I am as well. So I appreciate the steps and the materials that we're expected to get and kind of highlighting our priority reads. It's unclear to me in the next 2 months, timeline, expectations, if there's something we need to, halfway point, we need to be here by half point. I mean, any thoughts or notes?
Would it be helpful to tell you that one of the first things that we're going to do after we've talked to the staff is going to be to go back and do a real quick and dirty work plan. Here are the milestones. Here are the meetings. Here's what you need to know by this point, and this point. I mean, it's not going to be elaborate. It won't be a spreadsheet, but it'll be something that you can follow, and we can say, okay, if we're stuck here, what do we do now? But it will be a work plan, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Very good. One caution I would give you, and I'm sorry Mr. Burkett's gone, but everyone at least identifies this as a Cody building, and the architecture is beautiful. Whether it is functional for its current purpose is certainly a very valid question. Don't get bogged down as to what will happen if you decide to go to X or to Y. That is a stunning piece of architecture in a city that treasures architecture, and we will find a appropriate use that is public if that becomes the question.
So in the interest of time, so if we can wrap up. So it sounds like, and you're going to create a work plan and then work with city staff to get all the onboarding material, the most important onboarding materials that you identify with the chair, that based on our discussion today. If people need more information and have those questions, I would then prepare those and raise them. And so then the next meeting based on the work plan can be designed around that. And then are you leading the process for that? Mm-hmm.
Please.
That was too easy. We absolutely can, in partnership.
Yes, yes.
I don't want us to play solo. I would think.
Your mic, I'm sorry, we're recording.
Sorry about that. We would lead the process, facilitate the process in partnership with the city.
Great.
That's how I see our joint roles there. If I were sitting on the building committee right now, I would want to know within 24 hours when the next meeting is going to be.
Well, I was hoping we could decide that today.
Yes. Great.
So we should give that some thought. Does everyone have their calendars? But we do know it's not on a Tuesday, the second and?
Second and fourth Tuesdays.
Well, I think we start with the time of day. Is this a good time for everyone?
Is there a particular day in October that you're expecting this? Maybe that's where we should start and back up.
Well, the city council meetings will be October 2nd and 16th.
So we can take the 16th?
I would say certainly not the 2nd, probably. Now here's the other possibility is, and again, I don't want to speak for the city council, that it would be a potential just special study session in and of itself. But again, that's for the full council to decide.
It is for full council to decide, but certainly the possibility of a meeting on the 16th and then a special session sometime subsequent. October is one of those months where we have
a fifth meeting.
We have 5 Wednesdays, so it's conceivable.
And if I can, because we're waiting on a work plan, and so let's just schedule the next meeting as soon as possible, and then we will get a work plan, and then we'll work backwards and look at that. So, do you have dates to propose?
Can we have at least a week to do our homework and read all that?
It looks like Wednesday will be a preferred day. Is that because of the other conflicts for this group? Is there?
Planning Commission's Wednesday.
What time?
Are you
I
dark
wouldn't
in
do
August?
Wednesdays.
Are you dark this August?
City
This
council.
month?
Yeah, we're dark
if you ever
August.
want us.
Okay.
But so am I.
So Monday or Thursday?
Monday or Thursday.
Are we talking the 22nd or the 29th?
I'm looking at August here, right?
Right, yeah.
So probably what's today is the 13th, so it's either the 26th or the 29th. If we have time, if you guys want a week to take all the information and
Could
study.
you make it the 29th? I'm back in town on the 27th, and I'd really like to.
And I was going to say this, with all due respect to everyone around this table, we're not going to probably pick a day where everybody can be there. I
That's
think we
true.
have to, with this time frame, I think we just have to say we're going to do our best to be there, and if you can't, let me know, and I will be available to keep you up to speed, because it's just that time of year. So
Tony or I, we both are working with another client on the 29th.
When are you available?
Not the 29th.
26th?
Almost anything up until that date and after that date.
So how about the 26th?
And I think we need to plan weekly meetings. There's such a tight timeline on this. that the idea that we would plan it every 2 weeks is too,
I think that that's my feeling too, that we're going to have to schedule weekly, at least check-ins and phone conversations, if not personal meetings or something. But I think that gives you guys, it gives them time to gather all the information, get it to you, give you a chance to read it, and then I want to build in, if you come back and say, hey, could we have this? I can distribute that, right? So the 26th would mean everything is out there, everything is really ready to come in and start having our conversations with our leveling of here's where we are. How is that?
And I'm willing
Okay.
to do a tour or multiple tours at the library, and we could do that before that meeting if you wanted to.
Okay.
So I can do that too.
So it sounds like the 26th at 5:30, is that what we're suggesting?
Is this a preferred time?
We're actually waiting on them. Somebody said they were going to be out of town that day.
By the way, they may not be physically with us. They may be calling in to being a part of this because of their travel schedules, correct? Is that, or will you be here on the 26th? You can't be here weekly, I know, but we
can't afford her.
and is the 27th off the table?
Because it's
Yes.
a Tuesday and it's the last Tuesday of the month.
That's
It's
the
board
fourth
meeting.
Tuesday. Oh, the Tuesday, okay.
Yeah.
Or could you do it earlier in the day?
Okay with me.
No, I can't do it.
Is there people who work here?
I think it's really important to not hold these meetings during the day because working families can't participate.
Understood. You could come from the 26th.
okay, 26th, 5:30?
Okay. Do we have this room?
Sure.
Thanks.
Would you like Lisa and I to participate
Yes.
as the city council subcommittee? Do you want us to back off and let you do your process?
I think,
You're always welcome.
I think you should come if you can.
You're
To
always
every
welcome.
meeting, I think it would be very helpful.
One benefit of having an independent process is that it will be not seen as political, but it'll be seen as independent. So I know that where the California Voting Rights Act working group did independent work, really distinct from the city council, so that the process is protected and not Christy Holstege wants X for a building, is protecting the process. So I think we're here for you however we'd like. I'm happy to participate in the next meeting if you want our kind of guidance in the initial stages, but I do think probably, and it's up to you how you'd like to use us, but thinking about protecting the process to be independent is politically beneficial.
I think that with the next meeting being our level-setting meeting, I think it would be helpful because then you know where we're starting from.
Great.
Because you might hear something there and say, oh, no, or I haven't thought about that. So being at that level setting, and then if you skip a meeting, at least you know we're progressing through the process. Is that okay? Does anyone disagree with that? I mean, I think having that level setting is going to be really helpful.
Not in town that week, and, but so, we'll play off, but we want this to be your discussions, your decisions.
And just in terms of process, when we get to a report, because having worked with the California Voting Rights Act, I know writing the reports and getting them to council took a couple weeks. Can we assume that with the decisions we make, you will be writing the report?
The recommendation.
Or the recommendations?
We will be giving you the data and the input, I'm sorry. We will be giving you the data for you to make your recommendation. We could certainly help you write a recommendation report, but that wouldn't be normally our job to write that report.
That's maybe something we'll discuss. It's just that we've got a tight timeline.
Yeah.
I know we had to,
We could certainly work with the co-chairs to put the report together.
I think that Jeannie and I will probably have to
Okay.
do some of that heavy lifting to prepare the report, right? Yeah, okay.
Will there be minutes of the meetings?
I've taken notes, and I'll be happy to pull those notes together, and I can't promise you I took very detailed notes, but I can start doing that, yeah.
But we do plan recording, so we'll have a detailed recording, and then obviously we'll have summary minutes, if you will, in terms of actions.
That's up to the committee. If you'd like to assign someone as the, recording the minutes or taking notes of the meeting, then that's up to you.
Or rotating those roles.
Right.
Might be an option too.
Yeah.
So if the meetings are recorded, we're going to have access to those recordings? Or no?
The very next day.
Oh, so, if you really want to know exactly what went on.
And
we
and
can-
actually, if you like, we can go and post them on the website. We do put them on YouTube, we put them on the website, if you're okay with that. The next day.
That's wonderful. How more accurate could we be than recording? right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's no mistakes there.
Absolutely.
And then did anybody want to propose a time to come for a tour of the library? Or
Reach out to you.
do you want me to just send out an invitation and?
If you could
schedule
send out
that
maybe
offline?
like 2 or 3 options next week that
Okay.
work for you, and then
Yeah.
anyone who's interested can take up that
Right.
offer.
Yeah, and then if you're busy next week and you can't make it, we're a
I
public
don't,
library.
I don't
can
think
come
you
see
want
us.
to do it as the whole group, because then you'd be involved in public comment and other things. So I think I would just offer individual tours.
Sure. So I'll be there if you need me.
Anything else? Well, this one's finished, and
Thank you.
we
Thank
thank
you.
all of you
Yes.
and everyone out here.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Looking forward to the work.
I have no idea what,
Yes, I would love one.
we missed our entire vacation.